as you're coming in, as you're getting yourself renamed, and I'll keep repeating for folks who didn't hear it, we had a little glitch where a lot of people are coming in as Sarah Bankert. So if you look at your name and your name is Sarah Bankert, you can click the 3 little dots over your picture and rename yourself to your actual name. Andy, is there another way to do that?
There is. If they text me their name, I can put it in for them.
Great. So if you put your name in the chat, then Andy can change your name for you. Now, also as you're coming in, a couple things to note. So one really important thing is that we do have simultaneous interpretation in the meeting today. And so that does mean you'll need to select either English or Spanish as your language channel. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can see a little globe that looks like this. And you can click on that and you can select either English or Spanish. If you select no channel, then you won't be able to hear everything that's going on in the meeting. So it's really important to select the language channel that applies to you. And then also as you are coming in addition to sharing your name in the chat, if you need to be renamed, would you please also share in just a few words how you identify your role in food systems work? Go ahead, Andy.
Caitlin, are you on the English channel? It doesn't sound like it.
Oh, that's a good question, Andy. Let's see. Let me just... Let me figure out how to do that. All right, 1 second. Oops. Okay, now I'm on the English channel.
I just checked. My name is there.
And I will ask folks, please, you came in muted. Please keep yourself on mute unless we invite you to unmute yourself. That way we'll reduce background noise. And if at any point we mute you, it will just be for that purpose. So, please don't take offense if you get muted by one of the co-hosts. All right, so as you're coming in, please, like I said in the chat, share in a few words how you identify your role in food systems work. So that might be your professional title or just however you would talk about that for yourself. And then in a few words, why you're excited to be here today. What brought you to this meeting? What are you looking forward to about the conversation? Try to keep it brief because we've got a lot of people here, so there will be a lot of answers. I want to offer a few more reminders before we get started. So just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be sent around to anyone who's interested but wasn't able to attend the meeting. Will also be sent to all of you. So just, reminder that what's happening here is not necessarily staying here in this room. Like I said, please stay muted unless we invite you to unmute yourselves. And then we understand because we're on Zoom that a lot of people have new office mates, which might be pets or children or things like that. And if they require your attention, that's totally understandable and okay. Please take the time to do that. Also, if you have questions as we go along, please type them in the chat. And Andy is going to be our tech support and chat monitor for the session. Hi, Andy. And so Andy will he'll either try to answer your questions, or if he can't answer them, then he will hold on to them for someone else to answer later on. And we do plan on sending out an FAQ, or frequently asked questions, after the session. So just reminding folks who are coming in, you do need to choose either English or Spanish as your language channel by clicking on that little globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom. And I think we are going to get started. Let's see. I'm just admitting a few people from the waiting room. Great. Once those folks come in, I'll just say the reminder about choosing a language channel. So for the folks who just came in, since the meeting's being simultaneously interpreted, please choose either English or Spanish as your language channel by clicking on this little globe icon so that you can hear everything that's going on in the meeting. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here today. I'm really excited about this information session and the fact that there are so many people here and people coming from so many different backgrounds and positions in the food system in Hampshire County. We have a lot to share with you today. We're going to try to get through it at a reasonable pace, and I'm hoping that we can, reserve a little time to field some questions from the chat live. But I will get a little bit into the agenda. Let's see. So we have several awesome presenters today. So I'm Caitlin Marquis. I'm the coordinator for Healthy Hampshire. Many of you know me, have worked with me before. For those who might be less familiar, Healthy Hampshire is an initiative at the Collaborative for Educational Services. We work on access to healthy food and walkable and access to opportunities for physical activity, particularly walkability, by looking at policy systems and environmental level change. So many of you have been working with us on those changes for many years now, and the rest of you will get to learn a little bit more about what that means today. We also will have Jeff Harness from Cooley Dickinson Health Care presenting, Courtney Anderson from the Massachusetts Health Policy Commission, and then Kia Aoki, Roz Malkin, and Pat Keith from the Food Policy Council Governance Circle. I'll just share a little bit about what that is right now, since it's going to come up, several times as I go through the presentation. So the Food Policy Council Governance Circle is a group of community members who are meeting right now to select a governance structure for the eventual Food Policy Council. And you'll hear more about that, a lot more about that in a bit, but that's just sort of a high level overview so you know what that means when you hear Food Policy Council Governance Circle. And thank you again to our chat and tech monitor, Andy Grant, who I'm sure is being very helpful to many of you right now, as he is to me. So thanks so much, Andy. So just a brief overview of what we're going to cover today. We're in the welcome right now. We're going to do some acknowledgements, and then I will kick it over to Jeff Harness to introduce the partners involved in this project and give those partners a little opportunity to give you a wave and introduce themselves. I'll cover some background about how we got to this point of this meeting and where we are now. There will be a couple polls, and I'll share a little bit more about how to respond to the polls briefly. And then you'll hear a presentation from the Food Policy Council Governance Circle, and then we'll look ahead a little bit at what's to come over the coming months. All right, so I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement for the contemporary Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden counties region. I want to thank Andy for sharing this particular acknowledgement with me. You are welcome to read along on the screen, but I'll also read it out loud. We want to acknowledge that we are standing on and benefiting from land that has been seized, expropriated, and stolen from Indigenous peoples. For thousands of years, this has been Pecumtuck land. This is still the homelands of the Pecumtuck, Norwottuck, Orinoco, Agawam, Nipmuc, and Abenaki. These native peoples and their descendants are still living here among us. Every time we gather here, we must acknowledge and respect that fact. Next, we have an acknowledgement that was actually written by a member of the Food Policy Council Governance Circle, Lauren Mills. She requested that another community member read it. So I'm going to have Kia, wherever you are, if you could unmute yourself and read this acknowledgement.
We recognize the African Americans and all other Indigenous and persons included in the African diaspora that have contributed to the development of agriculture and historical academic preservation from the past generations to the present. We also recognize the rich spiritual culture, artistic contribution, and pursuits of justice that have enriched the communities in which African Americans have lived, worked, persevered, and achieved. We honor their collective spirit by making sure our efforts towards a better community for the future will prosper.
Thank you so much, Kia, and thank you, Lauren, for writing this. It's a beautiful acknowledgement. Okay, so I promised I'd share a little bit more with you about the polls for today. So there are a couple of different types of polls. One is a type of poll that's going to happen during the meeting. You will see the slide come up that asks you to participate in a poll. There are a few different ways that you can get to the poll, but you will need to go to it in your browser, and it will populate answers on the screen in real time. So you can either click this long link right here and open that right now. That will bring you directly to this event. Or you can go to slido.com and enter our event code, which is 20053. When I get to the polls with the slides on them, you'll see this information again. And there will also be a QR code. So if you're using your phone, you can use the QR code to access the polls. But you will have to access the polls in a browser, either on your computer or mobile device, to give an answer. So just wanted to prepare folks for that. And then another really important poll is a post-meeting survey that I'm really begging everyone to fill out, please. Because that is the survey that is going to tell us who is interested in staying in this conversation, at what level you're interested in staying involved, what is your interest, what kind of values are you bringing to the conversation. So it's a really important poll for us. We're really going to use it. We're going to use the results of the survey. So if you don't think you're going to be able to stay until the end of the meeting, I would ask you to click on that link and open the survey in your browser right now. And Andy, maybe you can paste that link in the chat as well.
It was just pasted in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, click on, so open that link, and then, whenever you're able to come back to it, if you could just fill out the survey whenever you get the chance. Like I said, that will tell us, do you want to stay involved? Should I keep emailing you? Should I leave you alone? So please do fill that out.
Caitlin, I misspoke. The Slido was posted in the chat, and I'll see about the other link.
Okay, great. Do you need me to stay on this slide?
I don't, how do we capture the link? I'm looking at the slide.
Can you copy and paste it from the slide or click on it from the slide?
No.
Oh, you can't. Oh, okay. Well, that's my bad. I can copy and paste it in the chat, I think, Andy. Let me see. Nope, I can't do it.
I'll work on that, Caitlin. No worries.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm going to kick it over to Jeff Harness from Cooley Dickinson now, who's the sort of lead applicant on the grant program that's funding the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So Jeff is going to introduce himself and some of the other partners involved in this work. Take it away, Jeff.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Caitlin, and welcome everyone. And a few words about me and Cooley Dickinson. So we are indeed the lead applicant for this project. In fact, healthcare organizations were required to be the lead applicant. But having said that, we're thrilled that the Collaborative for Educational Services is the lead community partner, along with the Hilltown Community Health Center as a partner and the Hilltown Community Development Corporation. And we're hoping more and more partners will come on as we get this project underway. My role at Cooley Dickinson is the Director of Community Health and Government Relations. So I am involved in a lot of different health projects, but food systems are certainly my favorite. So let's talk about who else are some of the key partners. From the Collaborative for Educational Services, you've already met Caitlin, and if you don't know Caitlin, I can tell you she's wonderful to work with, very organized, gets stuff done. So thank you, Caitlin, for being such a great partner. Also from the collaborative, we have Sarah Banker. Will the real Sarah Banker please stand up, because there were so many of you. We also have Rosanna Salazar and Sue Cairn. From the Food Policy Council Governance Circle, we have Kia Aoki, Andy Grant, Pat Keith, Roz Malkin, and again, Caitlin Marquis. But wait, there's more as I'm flipping my page here. We also have Lauren Mills, Lourdes Santiago, and Johanny Valerio. From the Hilltown Community Health Center, we have Eliza Lake and Kim Savory. Representing the Hilltown Community Development Corporation is Dave Christopoulos. And for the Mass Health Policy Commission today, we have Courtney Anderson and Taylor Bungo representing other folks from the Health Policy Commission as well. So again, welcome everybody. And if you have any questions about Cooley Dickinson and our role, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm actually the award manager for this project. So I'm kind of Caitlin's partner in crime here. So I'll turn it back to you, Caitlin. You're on mute.
Thank you. I'm just taking a brief break from sharing my screen to make sure we get that post-meeting survey link in the chat. And then I will go back to my presentation. So here's the survey link for everyone. All right. Okay, and actually, Jeff, thank you so much. Really appreciate those introductions and you sharing a little bit more about your role. And now I'm actually going to turn it over to Courtney Anderson from the Health Policy Commission to talk a little bit more about your role.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Anderson. So I am the MassUP Investment Program Manager. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the investment program, which is the funder for this project, as well as the Health Policy Commission. And I just want to say thanks so much for inviting me and giving me a chance to speak. It's wonderful to see this work come to fruition. Okay, so first, the Health Policy Commission, or the HPC for short, is a Massachusetts state government agency that develops policy with the goal of reducing healthcare costs and improving the quality of healthcare for all the residents in the Commonwealth. We're a relatively new agency, founded in 2012, and our mission is to advance a more transparent, accountable, and equitable healthcare system through research, policy development, and innovative grant programs. Caitlin, next slide, please. So the MassUP Investment Program, which is formerly known as the Moving Massachusetts Upstream Program, is one of these innovative grants that the Health Policy Commission has implemented. Essentially, this grant program funds partnerships between healthcare providers and community organizations that seek to address a root cause of health inequity in a specific community. The grant began in September and will last for a total of 3 years. So here you'll see I've listed 4 partnerships that we're funding as part of this grant program. 2 of these partnerships are specifically focusing on addressing their community's food systems. That's this program, the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. And we're also funding the Springfield Food Justice Steering Committee, which is focusing its efforts on a number of neighborhoods in the city of Springfield. And I know Sherelle is joining us here today, so I just want to say hi to her. She's our award manager for that grant. The remaining 2 partnerships are prioritizing the economic stability of their communities. These are the cross-city coalition of the cities of Chelsea and Revere, and the Heal-Winchendon partnership, which is in the town of Winchendon, Mass. And interestingly, they also have a food component as part of their economic stability work. Okay, next slide, Caitlin. So this program is administered by the Health Policy Commission, but we've worked very closely with our partners at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health to both design the program and manage. And as part of this work, we spent a lot of time thinking through what our key values were and our guiding principles are for this program that's helped shape the design and also will continue help shaping the program as it continues. So some of these guiding principles and key values are to empower communities, create and sustain equity, promote what we call upstream work, which means prioritizing policy and community-wide changes instead of addressing just individual needs. Enable alignment among partner organizations and communities, ensuring enduring partnerships that build lasting and sustainable relationships, hopefully far beyond the life of this grant. And finally, our value is to promote continuous learning. So that's for our partnerships and as well as the HVC and the DPH. Okay, next slide, Caitlin. So finally, I want to end on our theory of change. So, oh, Caitlin, I think you want to go back one. There you go. So basically, this is our reasoning behind the program. You know, if you hear the Health Policies Commission's mission is to reduce healthcare costs, it's kind of hard to think about how this work is connected to that, but we do believe that it is. So I'll describe just sort of one by one our main priorities and goals for the program. As part of our design work, we have a lot of goals for the program. These are just, I would say, the largest ones, or the most important to us. So the first being, our goal is to have effective, equitable, durable, and community-based partnerships that are durable, as I've said. So we think that these partnerships between healthcare providers, community organizations, and residents themselves will create a formidable team that can focus their efforts to make an impact on a specific identified issue in the community. So in this case, it's food policy and issues around food security. Another goal is ensuring changes in conditions to address root causes of health and economic inequities. So this means we hope the partnership's efforts will result in a notable change in the community that will eventually lead to an improvement in the identified focus areas of economic stability and food security. And then finally, health and economic equity within the community. So this is really thinking very long-term. What we're hoping to see is that these partnerships we're funding will be the driving force towards greater health and economic equity in their communities. So we hope all of these partnerships will continue the work past the 3 years of this grant, and we think that this long-term commitment will show some significant change. So again, really looking forward to seeing more about the project, hearing more from the rest of the presenters. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And I'll just say for everybody else, you know, when we, Healthy Hampshire, and I think Cooley Dickinson too, when we saw this MassUP funding opportunity, it really kind of felt like it was tailor-made for what we wanted to do with the Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So we're really thrilled to be partnering with the Health Policy Commission and DPH too. On implementing this project. I think the goals of the program are so aligned with the goals that we have been focusing on here in Hampshire County. So thanks, Courtney. So to get a little more into how we have been approaching this work, I'll share some background on sort of how we got to where we are today. So starting back in 2017, and you know, this is just sort of Healthy Hampshire's timeline. I know there are so many partners here who have been engaged in so much work for such a long time. So this is just a piece of the puzzle. But in 2017, Healthy Hampshire partnered with Cooley Dickinson to conduct a Hampshire County Food Access Assessment, and part of that was the Food Access Advisory Committee. There are some folks here today, I believe, who were members of that Food Access Advisory Committee. So if you can remember all the way back to 2017, you may also remember that one of the top priorities that came out of that committee was establishing a Hampshire County Food Policy Council. So it took us a few years to get there. On the way, we established a mobile market working group and a Hilltown Food Council to work on a Hilltown mobile market. Mobile markets were also a huge priority coming out of the food access assessment and plan. So we have focused on those quite a bit. We have also done mobile market work in Amherst after an Amherst food justice planning process that also prioritized mobile markets. And we've done some community garden work, primarily at Hampshire Heights in Northampton, a little bit at another Florence Heights in Northampton, a little bit of work in Amherst, and then we have more work on community gardens in Amherst coming down the pike. And then there we are. Here we are now in 2020, and we got the opportunity to apply for MassUP. And we felt like we were really in a position with the amount of engagement that we had done and the degree to which our network has grown and diversified over the past 3 or 4 years, that we were really ready to go, and that this funding source of MassUP was a really good, strong funding source for how we wanted to approach this Food Policy Council. So I'll talk a little bit more about that approach. Right, and this is just to show, you know, there have just been so many ways that people have come into this work and so many faces along the way. And, you know, it just really, for me, it's great to look back and see all the different ways that people have come into this conversation. And I'll say once again, this is just Healthy Hampshire's perspective. I know so many of you out there are doing awesome work. You're bringing so many people into your conversations. You're engaging so many folks. But this is just sort of looking back at some of those ways I already mentioned that we've been able to engage folks, you know, including even like the Hampshire County Mobile Market Retreat that several people were probably at about a year ago, which was one of our first attempts at really bringing people throughout the county together to learn from one another and to share with one another. And that's really what we're hoping to do more with this Food Policy Council. So the goals of the MassUP grant are many, and first and foremost is to develop a food policy council. So that's probably obvious by this point. And the idea with that is to provide alignment and strategic direction among Hampshire County food system stakeholders. And as we're doing that, one thing we wanted to do, we were really excited to do that MassUP really supports, is governance by and for people most impacted by food insecurity. And so as we're thinking about that, we also want to increase the roles of those most impacted by food insecurity in decision making, or increase the power, I would say too. And then we also want to focus on midstream level changes to the built environment. So I'll talk a little bit more later about what that means. I think Courtney did a great job of talking about, you know, what do we mean by upstream change? What does that look like? I'll show a diagram later on that talks a little bit more about midstream change and what that means. But it could be things like community gardens at affordable housing complexes, mobile markets, food rescue projects, you know, sort of any change you can imagine to the built environment that's happening sort of on a systemic level. We also want to streamline food security goals. So some of you may know there are a lot of different plans and assessments out there already that have looked at the Hampshire County food system, you know, towns within Hampshire County, the state, the region. So we already have a lot of information about what the food system priorities are in this area. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to sort of streamline all of those, take a look at them holistically and decide, you know, where we should move next as a county. And then thanks to the great partnerships we have on this grant with Cooley Dickinson Health Care and the Hilltown Community Health Center, we are also hoping to strengthen collaboration between healthcare and sort of that community work and those feedback loops between the two systems. So you might be wondering, what is a food policy council? Or you might be an expert in food policy councils, I don't know, but I'm going to share this just in case you don't know. So a food policy council, essentially the way I think of it is it's sort of like a department of food, right? We don't have a department of food at the county or municipal level or federal level. There's no such thing really, but there are so many different stakeholders involved in food systems work, and they represent so many different sectors. Like the food system is impacted by all these different sectors. And this diagram is just some of the sectors that are on this call today. So you can probably think even of other sectors that aren't represented here that impact the food system. So it's a way to bring all those sectors together and sort of moving in the same direction. So there are certain things food policy councils are able to do. At a high level, the goal is kind of to identify and propose innovative solutions to make local food systems more economically and environmentally sustainable, as well as socially just. So some of the things that food policy councils that exist have engaged in include conducting research, making policy proposals, writing policy, educating the public, and even developing programs. So that's just, some of the things a food policy council might be able to do. And then why would we even want a food policy council? So some of the things that they can do include improving coordination, giving voice to the concerns of various stakeholders, serving as public forums for the discussion of key food system issues. And the real ultimate goal with all of this is to ensure that food policy is more democratic and that it reflects the diverse needs and perspectives of the food system's various constituents. So just to say a little bit more about that, I wanted to focus a little bit on sort of how we think about engagement, community engagement, and how we're looking to address community engagement with this opportunity. So some of you may have seen this diagram before. Essentially, it shows levels of community engagement on a scale where the left side of the diagram is lower levels and the right side of the diagram is higher levels. And I think a lot of the work, at least we, Healthy Hampshire, have done on the food system has kind of been in this involve and collaborate sort of mode where, we have community members, and I'll specify, usually when we talk about community members in Healthy Hampshire language, that sort of means folks who are not professionally affiliated, and oftentimes we're focusing on people with the specific lived experience of the issue we're trying to address. So in this case, we might be thinking about people who have experienced food insecurity or other challenges related to interacting with the food system. So moving sort of from that involve and collaborate kind of place where, it's really like we are still holding a lot of the power, but we are bringing people into the conversation, moving more toward sharing that power, handing over some of that power toward the empower and community-driven led side of the scale. And so when you think about initiatives that are community-driven or led in the context that I just said, we might just be there to support it. It might not have been our idea, we might not be in charge, but we might just be lending whatever resources we have to support. So this diagram sort of goes a little bit more into this sort of upstream, midstream, downstream kind of framework that is coming up a lot. And so I wanted to specify a little bit how the Food Policy Council sort of does this work of moving us upstream. And so if you look at this diagram, once again, it's a scale. So on the left, you can see the things that are sort of more in the upstream focus. And so those are big, challenging problems like social inequities related to class, race and ethnicity, immigration status, et cetera. And then sort of a step down from that, you have institutional inequities. So the ways that institutions might have more power than one another or power over one another. And then in the middle there, you have, and that's what I would sort of refer to as midstream solutions, you have living conditions. So the built environment as it relates to the way land is used, transportation, housing, healthcare, social services. So the way that we sort of think about this is that the Food Policy Council is sort of working on those institutional inequities, and that would be, making sure we have alignment, or like it says in this diagram, strategic partnerships and advocacy at a higher level and sharing power among the institutions involved. But even further upstream than that, we have the Food Policy Council Governance Circle, which you'll hear a little bit more about, that's really focusing on how do we think about the way that this Food Policy Council operates to address some of these social inequities or mitigate some of these social inequities. And then in the midstream sort of area, what's really exciting about this grant is that the Food Policy Council will actually have a discretionary budget each year. And the council will be able to decide what are some of the specific interventions that it would like to fund. So I imagine that some of those interventions will really sort of be in this living conditions or midstream category. All right, here's our first poll. I hope it works. I've never done this before. So this is when you want to go to slido.com and enter the event code 20053. And I think when you do that, you'll see on your screen at the top, it'll say Q&A on one side and then polls on the other. So you want to click on polls, and then you can answer this question. In 1 or 2 words, what do you see as the value of having a Hampshire County Food Policy Council? And hopefully this will work where as you answer the question, we'll start to see answers pop up on the screen. So I'm crossing my fingers. Yay, it's working. Awesome. And you can see up in this right-hand corner on the slide, this is the number of people who have responded to the poll. If you've never seen a word cloud before, what it does is it sort of counts the number of times a word appears. And so the words that appear more often are appearing larger on the screen. So you can see collaboration. Definitely a lot of people are thinking about collaboration. We can see empowerment is coming up, which is really awesome. Some other great responses here: undoing white supremacy, coordination of info, equitable engagement, shifting power, community, definitely. Community empowerment. So this is great. I'll leave this up for another minute or two. And thank you, folks, for figuring this out and responding and using this awesome tool. Yeah, so one of the things we need to think about when we think about networks is, what is the value proposition for the network? So if we think about the Food Policy Council as a network, we need to think about, why are people coming to the table? What's the reason that this thing exists? And so I can see pretty clearly, some pretty popular reasons people might be coming to the table are empowerment, collaboration, and community, which is great. So I'm going to move on to this slide, on from this slide, but I really want to encourage folks to keep responding to this poll even after I move on from this slide, because we will be taking a look at these answers later and using these answers in our process. So please do continue to respond if you are still thinking you need a little more time. So now is when I'm about to turn it over to the Food Policy Council Governance Circle for their presentation. And I'll just introduce Kia Aoki, Pat Keith, and Roz Malkin, who are members of the Governance Circle. I think let's just pass it to Kia, and then Pat, maybe somebody else can close out this presentation, or we can keep, while Kia's talking, we can keep trying to work on resolving your issue. Okay, great.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Kia Aoki, and I'm, along with Laura Santiago, we represent Hampshire Heights. And what we're doing in the governance circle is we're trying to create and propose structure and guidelines to assist the Food Policy Council in their decision-making process to expedite their goals efficiently and fairly. Currently, we are considering a system that requires a consensus rather than a vote to ensure that all members are heard from equally. This system may be based on a sociocratic model, which we are currently testing in our governance circle meetings. Once we have figured out what works and what doesn't, then we can present it to the Food Policy Council for consideration. And I will pass it to Roz.
I'm Roz Malkin from Chesterfield in the Hilltowns. Caitlin, can you put up the photo for me? Yes. Well, I was browsing through the internet, looking for an image or a metaphor that reflects the work that the Food Policy Council wants to do. And I came across this incredible photograph by Sato Jones, who is an artist and a community organizer. And this is known as the community meal, and also referred to as a seat at the table. And I think it reflects a lot of what the council hopes to do in the coming months and years. And food is about so much more than just what we eat, and food security. Food is basic to life, to learning. Children can't learn if they're not fed. And that's true for adults as well. It's food, and food security is about nurturance and having a sense of well-being. And as people have already been responding, food and food security is a way to connect. It helps to build community, and it helps to strengthen relationships. And very important is food and food security as a way of sharing power and resources. And it's particularly important for community people to have a say in what they eat and how they access their food. To me, food and food security is also a way of honoring each other's intrinsic value and diversity. One of the things I really like about this council is that even though we're a small group at the moment, there's a lot of diversity there. And I think that really helps us to learn and grow from each other and appreciate a lot of different kinds of needs and to respect each other more. One of my favorite ideas is food and food security as reminding us of how interconnected we are. And the need to work together. And when I look at this table, I just see so much of a sense of community and relationship building. And also the importance of food as an opportunity for people to gather and to rejoice. There's so much joy when people come together around food, and when people can access healthy and abundant food, there's even more joy. And to me, all of this work that we're talking about is something that is very sacred and very basic to human life. So our hope is that those of you who decide to join with the work of the Food Policy Council will help to create more seats at the table, as you see here. And just as an aside, before I end, I wanted to mention that this community meal was created, as I said earlier, by Sato Jones. This table, it's 300 tables put together. I think this is in Minneapolis. It's 2,000 people actually sitting at all these tables, and the tables are half-mile long. So if he could create that, I think there are lots of possibilities for what we can all create together.
Or maybe, Pat, do you want to just tell me what you were going to say and I can repeat it? Mhm. So the governance structure is meeting to look at different the governance circle is meeting to look at different governance structures that have been used in the past and compare them with sociocracy, which is intended to be more just, I think is what you said, Pat? And inclusive, right? And, oh, go ahead. So we've been collaborating to figure out ways that food justice and safety are representative of all members of Hampshire County as we report them to the Food Policy Council. Is that what you said? Okay. Right. So yes, thank you. We're focusing on empowerment, individual empowerment, equity, to develop a grounded plan to encourage everyone to have a seat at the table. I love that, Pat. And thank you for allowing me to do some English to English interpretation. Yeah. Definitely. That's part and parcel of Zoom life. So thanks everyone again for bearing with us. And I think we do have a little bit of time for questions. So I think, I didn't actually stop for questions after my presentation. So I wonder, Andy, are there any questions in the chat that we should be taking a look at? No? Okay. And I think Pat, Kia, and Roz, you maybe wanted to invite some questions about the governance circle. Is that correct? Okay. Seeing a thumbs up from Kia and a nod from Roz. So let's see, if you have a question, could you raise your hand either in real life or on the, with the hand raise function? And Andy, can you help folks find the hand raise function?
Yes, it's if you click on participants at the bottom, it's at the bottom of the participants list, a button raise hand.
Okay, Dane, I see that you have your hand raised. And would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay? Great. This is really, really exciting. I work for Community Action, and my job is to show up and help out however I can in whatever capacity Community Action can. So I'm really excited to be sitting in on this meeting. And I'm wondering, the governance committee, do you right now see this group as a way to fund and push forward the work that is already being done that you see happening in your communities? Or do you see it as a chance to brainstorm things that are entirely new, or both?
Good. Oh, looks like Roz and Kia both have answers. So how about Roz first and then Kia?
I can respond to a little bit of that. I mean, I think certainly, as Caitlin already said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we're talking about several communities that have unique needs as well, so that we want very much to hear from the community people and learn more about their needs and exactly what would help them to feel more food secure and have better access to available what's the word I want? Affordable food. So I think a lot of it is going to be creating programs that speak directly to the needs of the local folks without recreating the wheel.
And Kia,
Done.
did you have another response or in addition to that?
Well, I think in response to the question, it's both of those things. And also, I also think that down the line, like towards the end, we're looking to maybe write policy or create policy that will facilitate, these kinds of values and equity that we're looking at, which is why this all exists in the first place. So I really think it's going to be about implementing policies that's actually going to make this work happen, in real life for real people, rather than just discussing about that it's happening or discussing ways to make it happen, like all of that stuff really has an end goal. And I truly feel like this work is going to be able to finish that, like actually make it happen. So people will have access to good quality, healthy food. And in the meantime, and with all of that happening, it's going to improve the health of Hampshire, of all the counties, like hopefully of the whole state, at a point where, it will take pressure off the healthcare system. And, so many things that there's so many branches and so many different things that this is attending to. But in the end, it's really about creating policies that are actually going to be able to work.
And Kia, I wonder if you could share a little bit more about some of what you've shared with me and Courtney and Jeff, just about sort of the type of conversations that go on in your community around this work.
Okay, so
if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so I guess really down to a very basic level, like inside my own community. I live in Hampshire Heights, which is public housing. And in the past, we have had to really kind of, like my neighbors and I have had to come together to figure out ways to support one another if somebody has a need, or if we feel like somebody needs help with their, with having stuff to eat, and trying to figure out ways to get healthy food in a more affordable way. And we found that, we have really had to do a lot of sharing and collaborating and thinking about how to support one another if somebody's, having an issue, or if somebody's in trouble, or if somebody is having a financial difficulty, how do we support one another around that? And because we don't really have access, okay, so we do have access to things like food stamps and those types of things, but it doesn't really cover, fundamental needs that people outside of living in this kind of a situation can see, and so this is why we're really excited to be involved, because we can tell that story from inside, like on the ground, quote unquote, way to look at things, and where the struggles really are, and some of the walls we're up against. And sometimes it's really difficult to get a lot of people in power to take us seriously, because there's a stigma against poor people that's really profoundly obnoxious. Like, I can't even begin to tell you, like the kind of hostility that we can come up against at times. So yeah, so that's a lot of what just happens granularly, like suddenly, like organically, like when problems happen, we really do come together and support each other.
Thank you, Kia. Thanks for sharing. And Roz, I saw you raise your hand as well.
Yeah, if there's time, I just wanted to also say, the person who wrote in the chat talked about connecting the different food levels. And one of the biggest values was collaboration. So I think an important piece of the work will be really coordinating all the efforts so that we're not duplicating services, and that there's an overall overbranching organization or way of connecting people to what they need, and working in collaboration with other groups, so that the work itself becomes a community of its own.
I love that. Thank you, Roz. All right, so I will, it
see.
doesn't look like, oh, do we have more questions, Andy?
Yep, Pat has her hand raised and Jeff has a question.
Okay, great. Great point. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, there's a lot of regional variation in terms of what the challenges are. And then who was the next person in?
Caitlin, you might need to just translate English to English again.
Yeah, I just sent Nico a chat. I don't know if we actually have anybody on the Spanish channel right now, so I'm not going to worry too much about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Andy, who is next?
Jeff.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. So I think projects like food systems have so much potential to be fun. Some topics are a little more dry, but food really brings people together at all ages, regardless of language and culture. And my question is about bringing young people into the project. And how do you envision that we might do that, whether it's children, teens, young adults, just to make sure that their perspectives and participation are as included as we can possibly make it?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. So Roz and Kia, once again, it looks like you guys have answers. Roz, why don't you go ahead and then Kia?
Well, I served for several years on the board of the River Valley Market Co-op, and I've been thinking about schools and connecting kids as young as possible to the food delivery system, and I just think as much as we can go into the schools, work with the parents as well, but as much as we can take food issues into the school system, the better, because I think when children learn at a young age what healthy food is, or to appreciate good food and to like good food, they also can change or teach their parents as well, and that can, you know, make changes in different generations. So I think working with the school system is something I would love to see. And I'd also love to see some kind of mobile market van go around and work with communities and raise interest, and maybe create food festivals of some sort that have to do with food security or anything of that sort. I think is just, I mean, because it's about building community too. And I think all ages need to be involved. Even the Hilltown people who have such pride, they don't want to let anybody know they're hungry. We've got to find ways to help people feel comfortable enough and trusting the work that's being enough that they're willing to come out and participate. Done.
Thanks, Roz. Go ahead, Kia.
Okay, so I think something needs to be pointed out in this particular moment, and that has to do with kids that are living in less than ideal circumstances, or come from families that are financially insecure. And these kids learn at a very young age that they don't matter, that their needs don't matter, that they're not important enough to pay attention to. Like, if they're hungry, nobody cares. I mean, this is a real thing. And so if you want to get kids involved, like really, like young kids, like young teenagers, I think it's really important to make them understand that they do matter, that they're important, that they're the future of the country, that we want to assist in helping them to eat well so they can learn better. So their minds are functioning at a high level. Like all of these things are really important to these kids because a lot of them really have seen their parents come up against hostile circumstances that prevent them from getting their needs met, you know, and there's that stigma attached to all of that. So, I mean, I think the approach has to be like we thought a little bit about, you know, how these children view themselves, you know, and I think that unless they feel like somebody really does care and that they really are important, they're not going to want to be involved in anything because they're too busy trying to figure out how they're going to survive. So that's, I'm sorry if that was a little bit hard, but it's just a reality. You know, it's what I've seen.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, Kia. I really appreciate that perspective. It does look like Dane has another question. And I think this will be our last question before we move on.
Caitlin, I just wanted to point out Pat had her hand raised, I think, to also comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Pat, did you want to comment? Thank you so much, Pat. And I'm just going to summarize your beautiful comments for some of the folks who maybe couldn't hear you, although I won't do it justice. But Pat talked a little bit about the learning process of growing food and how important it is to engage kids in that, and talked about her grandchildren having gardens at her house and how excited they are to work in those gardens. And then also talked about the importance of school gardens and kids learning a little bit more about growing food that way. She also talked about well visits with healthcare providers and the fact that practitioners need to be able to talk to kids about nutrition sort of on their level, and particularly emphasizing that nutrition is about the whole body and mind and not just about whether their tummies are full or not. So hopefully I captured that all right, Pat. Thank you so much for offering those comments. And I think, yeah, no problem. And I did promise Dane the last question. So Dane, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Not actually a question, but an offer. I think what Kia brought up is so crucial, especially when we're bringing in youth involvement, to value the involvement that youth have in organizations and coalitions like this. And what's the number one way that we value people for their time is we pay them. We make it real. We make it substantial. And I will just say, coming from community action, we have framework for this, and we have youth that are really engaged in our youth programs, a lot of which involve things like training youth to be active in their communities and offering paid workshops and trainings for how exactly to work in groups like this. And I think that might be a really good inroad if you're looking for a way to engage youth. We've got plenty in the county who are looking for ways to be involved.
That's a beautiful offer and something we will probably circle back with you about, Dane. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on, and thank you everyone who's contributed to the discussion during this sort of question and answer period. It's really nice to have some back and forth, and I appreciate hearing other people's voices. So I just wanted to quickly show you this diagram of the values that the governance circle talked about that they bring to the work, or that we bring to the work, although I didn't fill out the poll that created this word cloud. But you can see the governance circle is really focused on food justice and voice and equality and respect. And I wanted to share this with you because I actually want to ask this group to do the same thing. So we have another Slido poll here. So once again, you can go to slido.com and enter the event code 20053. And so I wanted to ask folks, after hearing about how we're approaching this work, what's one personal value that motivates you to get involved? I'll give you all a few minutes to respond. The access coming up there. Access, engagement, sharing power, great ones. Equity, responsibility, empathy, love. Equity is showing up big there. Looks like we're hearing equity from a number of folks. Collaboration, health, social justice, joy, community, helping, economic empowerment, keep this open. Ooh, no empty stomachs. I like that one. Food as medicine. End the stigma. Great. The value of all people. Great. Thank you so much for these answers. I can see access, equity, and social justice are coming up really big. So those are clearly values for a lot of people here, which is great. I think those are values that I and the other partners involved in this work would most likely agree with. Okay. So once again, I'm going to move on from this slide, but if you didn't get an opportunity to share and you want to enter your answers in after I move on from the slide, that's totally fine. You just need to, it won't show up on the screen, but we definitely will use the information later on. So please do respond. Okay, so just looking ahead, I wanted to share a little bit about where we're going from here. So we have this info session today, and you're probably wondering what happens next. When does this Food Policy Council actually start meeting? Basically now through the end of the year, the governance circle is meeting to develop the governance structure for the Food Policy Council, like they talked about. And then we will also be hosting some learning circles in November and December. And I will share a little bit more about those in a minute. And then in early 2021, the Food Policy Council will begin meeting and developing priorities. And part of the reason for that is that we need to develop an implementation plan for the MassUP grant. So we will really start, getting to work in early 2021 so that we can have that implementation plan developed by the end of February, which is when it's due. And then through the end of the year, through the end of 2021, we will sort of go about implementing that governance structure, make sure the leaders or whatever roles are decided upon are chosen. And then the FPC will meet and continue to meet and identify priorities, and I hope particularly sort of priorities related to how do we spend that discretionary budget. It's great that we have those dollars. We want to make sure we identify some sort of worthy initiatives to dedicate those dollars to. And then the grant ends in 2023, but hopefully the Food Policy Council won't. Throughout that time, the Food Policy Council will continue to meet, work on its priorities, implement that governance structure, keep identifying those funding priorities on an annual basis. We do have a discretionary budget each year through this grant, and then identify future funding for the Food Policy Council. So what will we need to make this council sustainable, and how do we get that? How do we get those resources? So here's a little bit more about the learning circles that we're planning for November and December. So for November 24th, these are a little close to Thanksgiving and Christmas, but they are still, working days. So November 24th, we will be looking at transforming white supremacy in the Hampshire County food system and moving toward shared power. And so I've talked a little bit about this idea for a learning circle with some of the partners involved in this grant. It's an exciting idea. We have some ideas about how to do it, and the speakers are yet to be determined, so you'll have to stay tuned to find out more about that. Same for the December learning circle, which will be about zooming in and out on community food security in Hampshire County. So we'll really be looking at what are some of those big picture kind of assessments, plans, some of the big picture priorities that have already been identified for Hampshire County, and then also what can we learn from folks who are interacting with community food security on the ground. For example, folks involved in community gardens, or folks who are sort of experiencing the oppression involved in the food system on the ground, about what that looks like. And finally, this is my last slide, and it is a reminder to please take our very important survey that I'm sure Andy will put right there in the chat again for you. And this is the final step, the thing you really want to do, especially if you want to stay involved, you want to keep hearing from us. You want updates about, what the governance circle is doing. You want to hear, get any answers that to questions that might have come up during the session that we didn't get the chance to answer. So please do go and fill out that survey if you want to stay involved, if you want to keep hearing more. We're really excited to hear from you and to continue the conversation. And that's the end of my presentation. And I finished with 5 minutes left, which is kind of amazing. So I just wonder, with our last 5 minutes, are there any other questions folks would like to bring up or comments people would like to make? And once again, you can raise your hand in real life or with the hand raise function on Zoom.
Well, Caitlin, a few technical glitches aside, nice job, great participation, and I feel like we're off to a really great start. And really looking forward to everybody who wants the opportunity to join, to jump in and fill out that survey, make sure your contact information is there. Yeah,
thank you, Jeff. Yes, I agree. It was a really awesome session. I really appreciate everyone who attended and who bared with us through some of the tech glitches. We'll keep refining our practice around this. And yeah, once again, just really thanks everybody for being here. And I look forward to further conversation with you and further work. We have a lot of good work to do together. All right. Well, it looks like we don't, oh, Rosanna, did you want to say something?
Cheers
Oh, just cheers.
for everybody.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions or comments. Thanks again, everyone, just so much for being here today, and we will be in touch. Yeah, it's really great to see so many faces, and I look forward to working with all of you. Bye. You can unmute yourself and say bye if you want.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Hey, everyone.
Bye.